So in this session, I'm going to talk about identifying film genres and how do you approach film genres when you are um, trying to engage in screenwriting or screenplay writing. So what is a genre? Genre is basically a French word which means style. So primarily what we are going to look at is various type of categorization or stylization processes that are involved in different kinds of films. So genre could be defined as stylistic categories, where a particular movie can be placed on the basis of setting, characters, plot, mood, tone, and theme. A film's main genre category will be based on where the majority of the content lands. So that's how we tend to identify um, genres. Then there is something called a subgenre. Subgenre is a smaller category that fits inside a particular genre. So there is a larger uh, genre, and then you have another subgenre entering into the narrative. Often this is a mixture of two separate genres. The genres and subgenres change over time. Okay, it keeps moving from here and there, and they are informed by one another. What it means is they tend to complement each other. Okay, whether it is the main genre or the subgenre. And it's primarily the viewers who exercise a choice or the kinds of films that they watch. That is a genre film or otherwise. How do you determine a movie genre? You know, both from a point of view of an audience or both from the point of view of a screenwriter. The movie genre has the ability to generate subgenres. So very fluidly or organically, it can generate some sort of a subgenre, or as a screenwriter, you can do so, allowing another genre to enter into the narrative. Then it describes the style of a work of entertainment. So basically, all the elements that gets integrated into the narrative gives you a reflection of what sort of a style of work is it, and based on which a genre could be defined. Then, like I told before, it can be a combination of two genres if it is required. You can have a core genre film, or you can have a film which um, basically marries two different genres and presents you. What genres or subgenres your script will fall under is essential. You need to keep that in mind prior to the writing part as a screenwriter. That if you are making a genre film, your script or your film is going to fall under this particular genre or not. So all the stylization process or the elements you are going to integrate accordingly. It will be vital to the tone, atmosphere, characterization, and the story arcs of your eventual screenplay. The screenplay that you're going to write, its tonality, the atmospherics, um, entire characterization part, and the story arcs, the movement, how the story moves from one segment to another. All these things are important, keeping the genre in mind. It will be critical for the marketing and market potential of your eventual screenplay as well. So the script that you are writing or the screenplay that you're writing, many times is dependent on the market. So that your genre would allow the marketing team, or if there is market potential, so to say, of your screenplay, if you're writing a commercial script, more so, your marketing team can simultaneously start working um, backwardly towards the design aspect of it. If you choose to write a dramatic version of your concept, the characters and their arcs will take center stage as you focus on the cathartic aspects of the concepts. Now, we need to look at it from a point of view of what cathartic aspects are. So we tend to pitch as a rookie screenwriter, as somebody who is starting out, or an aspiring screenwriter, or even a professional one who is 3 films old or 4 films old. They tend to you know pitch a concept, pitch the characters, pitch their arcs, what is the movement of the characters from first stage to the last stage, from exposition to denouement, or from exposition to the climactic part of it. So when you're doing so, you need to keep how you are going to keep your audience engaged. More often than not, it is the cathartic elements or the cathartic aspect of the concepts that helps the film stay, in the market, or your screenplay in the market. So right at the time of conceptualization process, keep that in mind, that what you are trying to do is you are trying to dramatize a narrative. You are trying to write a story from a point of view where the audience must end up having some sort of cathartic impact drawn from the narrative. How this is done, I mean, how do we tend to do this categorization? Let's look at it. If you choose horror, you know, as the genre, some of that characterization will either be pushed aside or paired with psychological or physical horror movements. You take up any horror genre film, you would see this these elements play out. There is some sort of a psychological angle to it or a physical horror angle to it. That is something that creates movements, that's something that creates the scenes and the characterization process. If you choose a suspense thriller, the plot often takes center stage and the characterization amplifies the suspense and thrills within the script. So while writing, while developing those things, you need to keep this in mind that if a film is plot driven or is it character driven, if it is plot driven and it happens to be a suspense thriller, then the plot is vital. It's more important than the process of characterization, because the characters are going to amplify through their actions, they're going to amplify the suspense. So every thrilling element that you're offering takes your narrative from one stage to another. So while you choose to write a suspense thriller, you need to keep in mind how plot division has to be done and how strongly you can write and offer the plot. If you happen to choose comedy, the tone shifts away from the dramatic aspects of the premise and focuses on the hilarious elements of the characters in that situation. So here, while writing a comedy, your focus is not essentially on the plot, but more so on the characters and what sort of actions and dialogues they are going to enact or perform, which would give you an idea that this is going on the right track as far as comedy writing is concerned. Because essentially you are choosing to write, a genre film. So those elements needs to be clarified and they need to follow a certain path or a track, which is true to the nature of that particular genre. Almost every concept has multiple genre possibilities. What does this statement mean? So when you jump into the writing process, it's really easy. You have this idea that could possibly be a high concept or at least something that is engaging. You're excited and you want to write it, but you have to learn to stop and avoid cheating yourself out of a decision that could make that concept even better, deciding what genre or subgenre to write as it flows. So rushing into the writing part might, uh, you know, force you to end up with a bad screenplay. So nobody wants to write a bad screenplay. Everybody wants a screenplay which has to be accepted in the industry, which has to be accepted by a team. Because you are not writing a book, you are writing a film. And a film is written so that it could be taken to the production stage and post-production stage eventually. So what you need to do is you need to decide, if you're writing a genre film, you need to decide right at the concept level what genre or subgenre you are going to write. Accordingly, you are going to integrate the element. So here is an example. For Good Will Hunting, the film, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck developed this film, Good Will Hunting, as a thriller about a blue-collar mathematics genius um, that was being pursued by the government, recruiting him to be a cryptanalyst spy. Okay. So it was written right at the beginning. It was written as a spy thriller, okay, and something to do with script analysis. When Rob Reiner reviewed the script, he immediately told both the screenwriters, which in this case Damon and Affleck, both are extremely successful, famous Hollywood actors, and they're trying their hand in this. So what Rob did is, when he reviewed the script, he said, please get rid of that FBI plot line and focus on the characters, because the characters can actually bring out the narrative in a better way than trying to write it from a plot perspective or plot point of view. Later on, when William Goldman, who is an extremely famous screenwriter, went through the script for reading, so what he did is he sat Damon and Affleck down and said, please follow Rob's words, get rid of the FBI stuff, go to the family, go to Boston, go with all that wonderful stuff which was there in the narrative, but the focus was more so on the plot element, more so on how the cryptanalysis part would happen or how the thriller element would play out. So what happened is, later on, Good Will Hunting moved from being a thriller to an interesting character-driven drama. And the script went on to win an Academy Award. So could it have been a possible thriller? Yes, for sure. That simple choice of changing the focus of the script from plot to the characters and then focusing on the dramatic arcs of the characters dictated the genres from being a thriller to a character-driven drama. Now let's look at what are the popular genres, what are the tropes and expectations that audiences have, and what you could do possibly as a screenwriter to offer a certain kind of content that carries those elements very pronouncedly. So action movie requires stunts, set pieces, explosions, guns, martial arts. They are usually about a clear hero and a clear villain. Okay, most of the action films, you figure out in the first 20 minutes or 30 minutes that there is a hero and there is a villain. Action movies, stakes are huge because there's a lot of money that is involved in the production stage, creating huge sets. Most of the action films offer you a kind of universe which is collapsing and how the protagonist is going to save it. They are bombastic and move quickly because the pacing of the action film is extremely crucial, because audience need to be on the edge of the seat all the time. So how you're going to build those sequences, like a lot of action films have car sequences, car chase sequences, or the climaxes are big sets and they're dismantled because an explosion happens or the hero takes on or the protagonist takes on the antagonist. So that's how action genre is largely defined, and these are the kind of crucial or the critical elements that are taken into consideration while developing a writing. What are the tropes and expectations? There's a clear division between good and evil, lots of fighting and set pieces. So most of the action films have brilliant production design and they have great sets. And what you see essentially, like the nature of the word itself, action, that it requires or involves a lot of fightings. So the good always fights the evil and the good has to win over the evil. Examples would be James Bond, Fast and the Furious franchise, and the Marvel movies. Most of the Marvel movies that you see, they're action-driven films or action genre films. You can call them superhero films as well, but that's how it gets interconnected. Adventure movies are usually built around a quest. Okay, so the protagonist has to have a quest or some sort of a journey, and mostly these are faraway lands or jungles. Many adventures are periodic pieces, okay, that it is set in historical time. although there are contemporary adventure stories, which are mostly clubbed up with coming of age narratives. They can be swashbucklers or treasure hunts. So it depends how you're approaching the writing. But adventure movie requires that your protagonist to take that journey onto himself or herself, and then setting it up in relatively remote place or a difficult place. What are the tropes and expectations from an adventure genre film? The characters are like explorers. They could be native people, even pirates that dominate these plots. They usually involve ancient cultures, hidden maps, gold, and traps. The characters usually have to rely on both their wits and their strengths. So it's not that the physical prowess always takes over. So many times the gut instinct that the protagonists show are going to take the narrative forward. Examples could be Indiana Jones franchise, Pirates of the Caribbean, Mummy, those kind of things. So it begins with the journey of a character from a particular point, and then it goes to these faraway remote islands or some place where there is a hidden treasure, or they have to rescue community, so on and so forth. Comedy films. Okay, everyone loves to laugh, and that's the reason why comedy films are written, and that's how they have worked over a period of time. In comedy films, usually the stakes, when we talk about stakes, we're talking about the money involved in the production process. So while writing, you can write a comedy right inside a house and go and film it. And if the comic timing and the elements are right and the characters are being able to enact it rightly, then a comedy can work. It can vary in their darkness and the way they deal with life and death, because they laugh back at the philosophies of life or how we look at different perspectives of life. Comedies could be shorter films, spoofs, or they can have a broader cast. It depends on what kind of a narrative you are writing. What are the tropes and expectations? Comedies are light-hearted, fun. People watch it because they want to feel relaxed, often blended with romantic stories. That's how romantic comedies evolve, and most of the times they have ensemble. Examples could be Caddyshack, Bridesmaid, Friday, How I Met Your Mother. I'm also considering, series as well. So Friends could be an interesting one to locate in that genre. Then crime films or gangster films. There's something magical about imagining getting away with it. The Henry Hill thought so, and so does a lot of criminal cases across the film and the television world. That's the reason why the genre is still extremely popular. I mean, you take up Netflix, for example, or any OTT, you would find gangster and crime drama films to be all over the platforms. And year after year, so many content drawn from that particular genre. There are mobsters, there are bank robbers, serial killers, detectives, sheriffs, cops, FBI that get populated through the pages of this genre. So while writing, you need to do those kind of research or deep study about those characters and what they have done. It could be a real life one as well, whose story you are adapting, or it could be a fictionalized one. It depends. They can have a whodunit plot, or we can be following the antagonist perspective as well. Now, antagonist or anti-hero, it depends on your writing, it depends on the kind of universe that you want to create. Many times you end up creating a character who could be a gangster, but the audiences might empathize. Eventually, when it gets made, the audiences might empathize with that character. So it depends on from what point of view or perspective you want to approach that narrative. What are the tropes and expectations? We often see a courtroom sequence or a scene, a gunplay, violence, and ruthless tactics. There are many times the law can be seen as good and bad depending on who you root for, like I told you, and when the movie was released. So when movies release with Hays Code usually show bad guy getting punished for the action. Example could be Goodfellas, American Gangster, Hell or High Water, Sopranos, the series, Widows, and there's so many. I mean, you take up Netflix, for example, offers you like tons of content, almost more than 40% of Netflix content is based on this genre, and it has been successful over a period of time. And uh, people have created several series and films based on this genre because it is extremely popular and it works because people get a thrill from those kind of narratives. The drama, these are serious stories that hinges on events that regularly happen in everyday life, okay, drawn from um, our routine lives. They usually focus on characters and how these people arc over time, okay, almost real life, because we also undergo several changes throughout our lives. In different situations, we act and react differently, and that's how our character is judged. It's just that we don't self-reflect or introspect. That's why we don't consider our stories to be dramatic enough. But a drama, in terms of writing, whether it is in literature or in script writing or in cinema, does consider those things. Drama is regularly matched up with other genres because most movies and TV rely on character-driven stories to keep the audience involved. So this is crucial that you need to keep that in mind, that people, the audience at the end of the day, are going to look at the characters' life and how drama unfolds in their life. So while writing, it is important you keep in mind that drama alone might not be a sustainable genre. You tend to associate it with another genre and tell a story. That's why romantic drama um, or a gangster drama, that's how it is called. The tropes and expectations, dramas frequently follow characters you see as your friends, neighbors, families dealing with the struggles of everyday life. Okay, so the more realistic your tonality could be in terms of the depiction of those struggles, more endearing those characters can become. So, as a screenwriter, it is very essential for you to be observant in nature. So, observe your own life, observe people around you, their mannerisms, their characterizations will emerge from those sort of actions and reactions and mannerisms and how people act and react in different situations. They usually take place in a home, office setting, or with a group of characters forced to interact day to day. Examples could be Ordinary People, Parenthood, Manchester by the Sea, and Mad Men. Experimental genre, this is a non-narrative expansion to what you do within the medium. Okay, experimental films do not conform to what we normally say in everyday life, or the kind of conventions that we are going to talk about. I'm going to talk about eventually. So experimental cinema can be any kind of experimental narrative that could be developed. Many times the conventions does get established when the similar kind of films are being made or being similar kind of stories are being told. These are purely artistic achievements meant to elicit emotion and thought from the viewer. So many times audience do not relate to experimental narratives. Somebody who is not a very self-introspective person or has not read a lot of existential theory or is not familiar with the philosophical realms of life might not be able to relate with experimental narratives. So this is something that is least attempted because commercially it doesn't cut through much unless you have a producer or a director whose vision gets kind of aligned with you and they buy into that idea. So when you're writing an experimental film, please do keep that in mind that your approach needs to be extremely fresh in nature, offer something that is mind-blowing, and then it might work. So keeping that in mind, experimental narratives could be approached. What are the tropes and expectations? There is nothing you can really expect from an experimental film, except that maybe people calling it artsy. Okay, that it is an art cinema. That's what we say. We tend to say that, okay, this is an art cinema. That's how badly art cinema, has earned that reputation of being boring many a times, because people cannot identify. When more people cannot identify, it doesn't become popular, and become it because it doesn't become popular, um, it tends to be floating in a space where a lot of people don't get an opportunity or agency to watch those kind of films. Films like Tree of Life, Dogville, Love, Death, and Robots are good examples of how films can be experimental in nature. And the fascinating thing about experimental film is, um, as a screenwriter who is starting out, you can give it a try. If you are somebody who is into reading, or who has a fascinating concept or an idea, you can give it a try, and there is a possibility that it could be picked up eventually, in the OTT platforms, because they are constantly looking for newer type of content. Okay, fantasy films, mythic realms. Okay, a universe which is mythical in nature, talking creatures, swords, magic, knights. These movies and television series take place outside of Earth and at a time when magical things roam the Earth or Middle Earth. They are usually combined with an adventure or drama, but often involves the traditional hero's journey. So this also follows an adventure. This also follows or tracks the protagonist's journey, and these are the elements that get associated. Most of the times there is some sort of a magic or the other that gets associated with it. Creatures other than human beings would also be talking, because the realm is mythical in nature. So when you are developing a fantasy, how far you can push your narrative to, and what is your vision of that universe, is something that is going to define um, how this film is going to be. What are the tropes and expectations? These kind of movies and TV shows usually have mysticism, some sort of mysticism or the other associated with it. Some sort of royalty, humanoid creates like Elvis, orcs, and hobbits, and the laws of magic. You can expect sorcery and some great set pieces. Example would be Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Dark Crystal, The Wizard of Oz. You have seen most of it. If you haven't seen, please do give it a watch, and then read into the fantastical elements that are used in those films or in those narratives, and why those things work, because they're fascinating in nature. Everybody likes to see, you know, um, what sort of mythical realm the creators, both the screenwriter as well as the director, has um, offer in that piece of work. Historical epics. History is a great place to mine for ideas. Like literature, if you are not um, too well versed with the idea of writing and you don't have an original concept, it's interesting that you can, borrow or source it out from a historical event. So history plays a very significant role in screenwriting, especially when you are developing historical epic genre films. Historical epics or period pictures emphasizes in costume, sword and sandal, and usually cover a particular figure or series of events. So it depends on whether you're making a biographical narrative or you're approaching it from a plot point of view or perspective. Then you need to have events concurrently running, one event leading to another, and kind of offering you some sort of a causality, which would help the audience map out why this narrative is um, epic in nature. It can be based on an epic poem or a novel as well. You would see that in the Troy, for that matter. So tropes and expectations, many of these are based on true stories or some sort of a legend that exists. They prioritize the scope and scale of a story and have sweeping musical scores. So you need to have brilliant cinematographers, sound designers, musicians, all the technical elements coming together, or the technical crew coming together, to offer you a historical epic. I mean, one of the interesting facets of this is the scope and scale of that narrative. That it has to be larger in nature. Examples would be Braveheart is a brilliant example of how historical epic works. Lincoln, Cleopatra, Ben-Hur, Vikings, Troy. So there's so many examples of historical epic genre films. Horror films, okay, ghouls, ghosts, slashers, creatures, and body disfiguring. These are one of the key elements that you would find in horror films. Horror films and television focus on adrenaline rides for the audience that dial into the gore, the scares, and the creative monsters. Horror is always reinventing old classics like adding fast zombies and CGI creatures. It's also seen as the most bankable genre with a huge built-in audience. What is a built-in audience? A built-in audience is somebody which already exists. People like to get thrilled. That's why horror works. You know that um, you might get scared and you want those scary moments. That's why horror genre, as a film genre, horror works. So you tend to draw in elements which are horrific in nature, um, which could come in terms of characters, which could come in terms of the location or the sound. So there is a production angle to it, but at the writing stage, how do you approach writing a horror and what would be the implication of it? You need to keep in mind those elements and how the audiences might get into that space of blood and gore. Hopes and expectations, the final girl, the not dead yet scare, the dystopian endings, those are the ones that are mostly the expectations of the audience. Horror is famous for having story beats that we come to expect, like jump scares. Okay, you're following a character going there, and then there is a jump cut, and you move to another character's room. And what is going to happen in that room? Is that character that has been shown earlier is going to enter that room, and he or she is going to change into a creature? So those are the kind of things audience's mind is constantly thinking. So lean onto them and find different ways to subvert the narrative. Okay, the whole idea of subverting the narrative is when you are taking up a particular story and giving a different kind of twist and turn, which would keep the audience's expectations high and would continue. You have subsets like haunted houses, slashers, zombies, evil creatures, and even other subgenres that might, get associated with. Right. One of the examples that I can think of in this thing of switching from drama to horror would be Dusk Till Dawn, um, the film by Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino production. So how this thing moves from being a Western sort of a drama and then offers you the kind of horror that you would not expect. Uh, Straight up examples would be Night on Elm Street, American Horror Story, the recently released Get Out, and The Descent. And there's so many. You have Annabelle, Annabelle Rising, and so on and so forth. Then musicals, people sing in every scene. That's pretty much it. Okay, music. We are familiar with this genre because ours is a song and dance sort of a tradition that we have developed. Our narratives have emerged out of Giti Natya culture, the culture of dance drama, dance musical drama. So musicals, when you're looking at it from a Western point of view, should have some sort of, you know, um, singing renditions associated with it. So, and often associated with another genre, it could be dramas, comedies, horror, or anything. But if they are singing, if there's too much of songs out there and there's music and lyrics, it's supposed to be a musical. Other tropes and expectations, huge dance numbers, excellent choreography, and bellowing vocals. You can even throw in a concert film, you know, if you want to do that. My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, La La Land, Glee, West Side Story, Les Miserables. These are few examples of how a musical genre film plays out. Romance is a universal language. People tend to understand, people fall in love all the time, and then they experience that in the film. Romantic films are about people coming together, falling apart, and all the hurdles in between. So they can be paired with comedy or a romantic action movie, or a straightforward romance focusing on two characters and also falling in love. Um, you need to be extremely critical when you are writing a romantic films, because what happens is often there is a possibility of falling into the trap of creating a straight up romance. But we have seen straight up romance quite a bit. So it's basically what happens between that romantic narrative is something that creates expectations of the audience. The meet cute stands out the most, followed closely by breakup scenes. Okay, that's what has evolved over a period of time, that how people break up. Try and do some sort of an analysis between an Indian breakup scene that you often see in romantic films and a Western breakup scene, and that will give you a lot of insights to examine into how we approach our characters, how we approach ourselves in real life, um, as far as a romantic relationship is concerned. There are always friends counseling protagonists in question, and even tempters and temptresses trying to woo them away. Okay, if it's a triangular love story or a quadrangular love story, it depends on what you are trying to write. Um, Examples would be Harry Met Sally, Indecent Proposal, and Affair to Remember, the Vipers trilogy by Richard Linklater, which one of my favorites. Was like I love the narrative and in all the three films, Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, Before Midnight. Then science fiction. Science fiction needs to shine a light on the world, the way it could be, and the way we think it might happen. So there are two different things: our assumption of how the world outside is, and want a particular kind of scientific action or scientific temperament can drive us to. It takes us on adventures into the near and distant future. The problems in science fiction can be extraordinary and takes us for a ride with new gadgets and vehicles, something that you tend to notice if you are a fan of the genre, if you have read both in terms of literature and in terms of cinema. If you have experienced science fiction, there's nothing like it. And it's something that keeps you on the edge and offers you a world or a universe that people don't generally come across. What are the tropes and expectations? Aliens, spaceship, time travel, technology. So these are the crucial things that you need to keep in mind. This genre needs to tell us if we are worth saving, and maybe the machines need to take over. And this sort of a dichotomy that exists between human mind or our um, actions, and why machines might be better than us, because though they lack the critical conscience that human beings have in order to take a certain call and decide between good and evil, if machines take over and if machines are not programmed according to human ways of living, which is what artificial intelligence is doing right now, then if it is just programmed in the right way, then machines are going to, you know, create that universe which would be one track, which would be either good or bad, unless there are evil machines, which is something that you would see in Expendables. Uh, Science fiction addresses our society and its problems. It seeks to tell us about the way we can handle it if we only listen to the present. What is our current circumstances and how we can better them? Okay, or if it is required that we enter into this uh, unknown territory for that matter. What happens if we land up in Mars? If we make a Mars film, all of a sudden, or if there is a parallel uh, universe that exists. There are so many films about the other planet or the other universe. So what happens in that other universe is something that as a screenwriter you tend to develop, you create that universe. Example would be my one of my favorite films, 2001 Space Odyssey, Star Trek, Alien, Lost in Space, and the list is endless. Thrillers, what do you do when you wear over your head? This is usually linked with horror, action, drama, but thrillers are about exciting situations. Thrillers are always about exciting situations. So as a screenwriter, the more you develop exciting situations, and not just from screenwriting point of view, if you tend to just write scenes and sequences and you have so many things, and there's a constant danger or constant edge of the sword sort of movement that you have, then you might have a good thriller in your hand. They're about stressed characters. The characters are stressed because things are happening and they must need to act fast. There are corrupt investigators who might align with the bad forces or the evil forces, and there are criminals living on the edge. So this is something that works for a thriller. Or the tropes and expectations. If you go to a thriller, you want excitement, peril, and the edge of the situations. We always tend to look at the thrilling moment. It needs to be thrilling. So make sure that the suspense, the mystery, and the anxiety to over your pages. While developing, all these elements are to be integrated and kept in mind. The better a suspense or a mystery is, or the kind of tension and anxiety that you can create in the narrative, there's a possibility that it would work and the script could be picked up. Brilliant examples again is Silence of the Lambs, The Fugitive, American, and Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. War films or war genre films, mankind's capacity for violence is well known. You pick up literature, you pick up legends, you pick up history, you'd find wars written all over the place. But the modern world is the way it is because the sacrifices men and women have made throughout the centuries. So sometimes it's about good people as well. War movies are mostly about point of views. Men in foxholes, tanks, planes. They are about people finding commonalities, differences, sacrificing their lives for a larger cause, to save a piece of land, to save a country, to save a community. And the protagonists are fighting for. Hopes and expectations, as I mentioned above, sacrifice is key. Battle and war are about what you are willing to give up for freedom. And that freedom might not be yours as well. So it's paradoxical in that way that you might not live to enjoy the fruits of the freedom, but your community could be, or the community you are standing by, the country you are standing by, the piece of land you're fighting for. You're fighting for people. So it's people's freedom you're fighting for. So keep that in mind while developing or writing, that sacrifice is one of the most key elements. People sacrifice families, people sacrifice places, people sacrifice all the time. But in a war kind of a situation, it is done collectively. So in cinema and television, this genre can be about the best and the worst of us. It depends from which point of view or perspective you're approaching. And shine a light on this and the era to let us know about important facts and legends. Facts are twisted as well sometimes to create that dramatic tension. So it depends on how they're being approached. Examples could be Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, Dunkirk, Behind Enemy Lines, The Pacific. Those are a few examples of war films. So that's more or less what I wanted to talk or discuss about how genres in cinema could be identified and how you can approach them while writing for screens. For the screen, we are going to talk about a bit more about the genre in the next session and what all could be done individually when we look at genres in general and the kind of writing that it requires. Talk a bit more about the motifs and conventions and why the genres do not, operate in isolation. Why it's that relationship that matters. How you are trying to engage or push it in terms of your narrative. I'm stopping here.